My name is Stuart Bogle. I'm the founder, inventor, and patent holder of AVD. Yes, that's an old picture. Those are a few ways you can get a hold of me. I'm also on Facebook. Just search for Stuart Bogle and that picture. So what is AVD? AVD is a medical device used for the treatment of viral infections in blood that uses nanostructures. It uses no drugs at all. The simplest way to think of it is that it uses geometry, not chemistry. This is a prototype of the device. The way it works is one hypodermic goes into a high-pressure artery, the other goes into a low-pressure vein. Blood flows from the artery into the device back into the vein. Once blood is in the device, nanostructures trap, crack, and release the broken pieces of the virus back into the blood. This is not a filter. When I talk to people about it, they immediately think it is a filter. It is not. It does not add or remove anything from the blood. To give you an idea of the market potential, I'm going to use dengue fever as just one example. Each year, there are roughly 500,000 hospitalizations due to dengue fever, and with a projected price of roughly $3,000, it would generate roughly $1.5 billion a year in revenue just from dengue fever. That would include things like West Nile, hepatitis, HIV, Ebola, Zika, all the others I can't even pronounce. And if you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, he's created a cure for HIV, no, it's not a cure for anything. But it is a treatment for a lot of things. The reason why it is not a cure is because it cannot treat anything outside of the bloodstream. This is meant to reduce the workload of the immune system to give the body extra time to clear the infection on its own. It's meant to make potentially deadly infections into survivable ones, as well as reduce symptoms and recovery times. My target customers are hospitals, veterinary clinics, and NGOs. The AVD would require a doctor's prescription, so you'll never see it on the shelves of Walmart or Walgreens. And because it does not rely on a virus's chemistry, it can also be used for the treatment of animals. Anything with sufficient blood volume and pressure can be treated with the AVD. Who would be the competition? I have two categories, direct and indirect. Even though the answers look well-defined, in truth, they're actually kind of fuzzy. Direct competitors would be antiviral pharmaceuticals. Every single one of those is an HIV drug, and that's not even a complete list. The fuzzy part of the answer is that it's not an either-or situation, meaning you could use both the AVD and antiviral pharmaceuticals at the same time. So they really shouldn't eat into each other's market share. Indirect would be vaccines. Vaccines and the AVD work inversely from each other. Vaccines are only useful before exposure and are useless after exposure. The AVD is only useful after exposure and is useless before exposure. The fuzzy part of the answer is that vaccines do have the potential to eat into cells of the AVD. There are some vaccines that have eradicated naturally occurring viral infections like smallpox, and others like yellow fever, which still causes 30,000 deaths a year, are still around despite the availability of a vaccine. The other is a company I found out, and a product I found out by pure dumb luck within the last 6 months. A group of guys out of Harvard created a company called Opsonics to license the technology that they developed for the treatment of sepsis. Their device works very similar to mine. Blood flows from the body into the device back into the body. The difference is that they use chemistry. They're targeting bacteria, toxins, and fungus, and their device is a filter. Now, the fuzzy part of the answer is that the AVD has the potential to gain cells from their device. The AVD could easily be used with their device, and doctors may choose to do so as a precaution the same way that antibacterials are used as a precaution in viral infections. I have possible partnership listed as well. That would be a possibility of an exit if anybody were thinking about that. Barriers to entry, this is both mine and any potential competitors. First off would be my patent, but if anybody were to ignore my patent, the development of nanostructures would be the first barrier to entry. They'd have to play catch up with the work I've already done. But the biggest is FDA approval, and that's for everybody. I plan on getting animal approval first. The reason why it is much easier to get animal approval than it is for human approval. I can also use the data that I get from the animal approval process and apply it to the human approval process. I finished phase 1 animal testing last year. The human approval process has two possible paths. The first is for devices that already have an existing device on the market, like, say, a syringe. The other is for devices that do not have an existing device on the market, like the AVD. Those devices are held to a higher standard, a standard similar to a drug approval process, and that can cost in the range of $100 million. Which brings me to my financials, and you'll notice there are none. Let's be honest, anything I would have put up there would never have actually happened. So what I will say instead is this. Because what you're really thinking is how soon you could get a return on your investment should you invest. Animal sales would happen in roughly 2 years, and income would start shortly after that. Human approval would happen in roughly 6 years because that's the average time for a drug approval. But if I can convince the FDA that my device is similar enough to the Opsonics device, it would greatly reduce cost and approval times because the Opsonics device has already started clinical trials. So why do I need money? As I was doing phase 1 animal testing, I realized this is too big and too heavy. It is reasonable to expect a person to sit for a half an hour to an hour with 2 needles sticking out of their arm and be okay with it. It is not reasonable to expect an animal to do the same thing. I used cow blood for phase 1 animal testing, and I had to go to the vets to get the blood, and I witnessed one cow struggle so violently, I thought it was going to break out of the steel chute. At that point, I realized that had to be much smaller and lighter to be safer for everyone going forward. Phase 2 animal testing is going to require facilities like you would have seen in the movie Outbreak. It's going to require these facilities because phase 2 is going to require a live virus, and the people who own these facilities do not rent them out for cheap. This is not something I can do in my garage or my kitchen. Any employees is needed? I'd rather not hire any. I know investors want to see a management team, but as far as I'm concerned, if I hire somebody and they're not helping with FDA approval, then they're not helping. And I can't see how a CEO is going to help with FDA approval unless they used to work for the FDA. FDA consulting, I've never dealt with the FDA before, so I want a consultant to prepare me as much as possible before I deal with him. And to secure continued funding, I would be willing to hire a CFO. Someone whose sole job is to raise money so money is available when it needs to be available. That is if I don't have time to do it myself. That is somebody I would be willing to hire. Because quite frankly, my investment goal of $1 million is just the beginning of what I would need to bring this to market. So terms can be preferred stock, common stock, convertible note. It's all negotiable. Once again, that's what it is, that's what it does, that's who I am, and that's how you get a hold of me. I'll now take questions.